Every night, someone adds new photos to my childhood album. A MR.CREEPYCORE original creepypasta. I need to get this down while I still remember who I am. While I can still trust my own memories. Because every morning, there are more photos in the album. Photos I don't remember. Photos that shouldn't exist. Let me start from the beginning, before things got complicated. Before I started questioning everything. My name is Jordan Hayes. I'm 32 years old. I work as a data analyst for a marketing firm in Portland. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment on the east side, and up until 3 weeks ago, I would have told you my life was unremarkably normal. Boring, even. The kind of existence that wouldn't warrant a second glance from anyone, let alone whatever it is that's been doing this to me. It started the way these things always do in stories, with something small. Something you could easily dismiss as coincidence or a trick of memory. I was cleaning out my storage unit, one of those weekend projects you keep putting off until the clutter becomes unbearable. Boxes of old textbooks from college, clothes I'd been meaning to donate for years, that futon I'd convinced myself I'd use again someday. Standard stuff. That's when I found the album. It was in a cardboard box labeled Childhood, in my mother's handwriting, buried under some elementary school art projects and a shoebox full of participation trophies. The album itself was exactly what you'd expect one of those classic photo albums from the 90s, with the plastic protective sheets and the adhesive pages that had long since turned yellow. The cover was navy blue with gold embossing that read, Memories. I hadn't thought about this album in years. Maybe a decade. My mom had kept it meticulously updated when I was young, documenting every birthday party, every school play, every family vacation with the devotion of someone who understood that childhood was fleeting. She passed away when I was 23, and I'd packed away most of her things without really looking at them. It was easier that way. So I sat there in the storage unit, on an overturned plastic bin, and I opened the album for the first time in probably 15 years. The photos were exactly as I remembered them. There I was at age 5, gap-toothed and grinning at my Ninja Turtles birthday cake. Age 7 at the beach, building a sandcastle with my dad before the divorce. Age 9 in my Little League uniform, glove too big for my hand. Each photo was labeled in my mother's neat handwriting with the date and a brief caption. Jordan's 8th birthday, April 15, 1999. First day of 3rd grade, September 7, 1998. I spent maybe 20 minutes looking through it, hit with that bittersweet nostalgia that old photos always bring. My younger self stared back at me from the pages, frozen in moments I could barely remember. Simpler times. Happier times, maybe. Or maybe that's just what we tell ourselves about the past. I took the album home with me. Left most of the other stuff in the storage unit, I'd deal with it later, I told myself, knowing I probably wouldn't. But the album felt important somehow. A connection to my mother, to the person I used to be. I set it on my bookshelf between a forgotten copy of Infinite Jest and a travel guide to Iceland I'd bought during an ambitious phase that never materialized. For 3 days, the album sat there untouched. I'd glance at it occasionally, think about looking through it again, then decide I had better things to do. Emails to answer. Shows to watch. The mundane tasks that fill our lives and make us feel productive without actually accomplishing anything meaningful. On the 4th day, I noticed something had changed. It was a Saturday morning. I was making coffee, that first cup that makes the day feel possible, when I glanced at the bookshelf and saw that the album was slightly askew. Not by much, just a few degrees off from where I'd placed it. I remember thinking that was odd because I'm fairly particular about how things are arranged on my shelves. Not OCD exactly, just organized. I walked over and straightened it. That's when I noticed the album felt heavier than I remembered. I pulled it down, set it on my kitchen table, and opened it to a random page somewhere in the middle. 4th grade, looked like. There I was at the science fair with my volcano project. There I was at Jenny Williamson's pool party. There I was at Wait. That photo. The one on the bottom right of the page. I didn't remember that one. It showed me sitting in what looked like my childhood bedroom, cross-legged on my bed, looking directly at the camera with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not smiling, not frowning. Just staring. The timestamp in the corner read, March 23rd, 1999, and below it, in handwriting that looked remarkably like my mother's, was written, Jordan having a quiet moment. Here's the thing, I didn't remember my mother ever taking a photo like that. Candid shots, sure. Birthday parties and holidays and school events, absolutely. But just me, alone in my room, staring at the camera. That wasn't her style. She documented the big moments, the celebrations. Not the quiet, in-between times. I studied the photo more carefully. Everything about it was accurate. That was definitely my childhood bedroom. I recognized the polka copyright Mon posters on the wall, the blue comforter on my bed, even the way my bookshelf was organized with chapter books and action figures mixed together. And that was definitely me, probably around 9 years old based on my face and the timeline of other photos on the same page. But I had no memory of this photo being taken. None at all. I flipped through the rest of the album, page by page, suddenly hyper-aware of every image. Most of them were familiar, exactly as I remembered them from my earlier viewing. But there were others now. Small additions scattered throughout the album, maybe 1 or 2 per page. Me sitting at the kitchen table, doing homework. Date, October 14th, 1998. Caption, studying hard. Me in the backyard, standing perfectly still, facing away from the camera. Date, June 3rd, 2000. Caption. Watching the birds. Me in my bedroom again, lying on my bed, staring at the ceiling. Date, February 10th, 2001. Caption, deep in thought. Each photo was time-stamped, captioned in that familiar handwriting, and completely absent from my memory. Not just fuzzy or forgotten, completely absent. And here's what really bothered me. I'd looked through this album just 3 days earlier. I'd studied it for 20 minutes. These photos hadn't been there. I was certain of it. I called my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister. She's in her 60s now, living in Arizona, and she was the one who helped me sort through Mom's things after she passed. If anyone would know about these photos, it would be her. Hey, Aunt Linda. Quick question, do you remember Mom taking a lot of random photos of me when I was a kid? Like, just me sitting around or doing nothing in particular? There was a pause on the other end. Random photos? Not really, honey. Your mom was pretty selective about when she used her camera. Film wasn't cheap, you know. Why do you ask? I found that old photo album. Just curious about some of the pictures in it. Oh, that's wonderful that you found it. Your mother loved that album. She worked so hard to keep it organized. Another pause. Is everything okay, Jordan? You sound tense. Yeah, everything's fine. Just nostalgia, I guess. Thanks, Aunt Linda. I hung up feeling unsettled. Either my aunt didn't remember these photos, which seemed unlikely, given how involved she'd been with organizing Mom's belongings, or they simply hadn't existed when she last saw the album. Over the next week, I became obsessed with that album. I documented every photo, made a spreadsheet with dates and captions, even took pictures of the pages with my phone so I'd have a record. I was determined to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind, that these new photos were really appearing. And they were. Every morning, without fail, I'd wake up to find new images scattered throughout the album. Always the same style, candid shots of me as a child, alone, usually in my bedroom or somewhere around my childhood house. Always with those unsettling captions in my mother's handwriting. Always dated appropriately for the surrounding photos. But here's where it gets stranger. The photos were changing the way I remembered my childhood. I'd look at a photo of myself sitting in my bedroom at age 10, and suddenly I'd have this memory of that moment. I could remember how the carpet felt under my hands, how the sunlight came through the window at that angle, the smell of dinner cooking downstairs. Details that felt absolutely real, absolutely true. But I knew that I hadn't remembered any of this before seeing the photo. The photos were creating memories. Or maybe they were recovering memories I'd somehow lost. I couldn't tell which, and that uncertainty was eating me alive. I started having trouble sleeping. I'd lie awake, staring at my bookshelf where the album sat, wondering if it was changing in real time. If whatever was doing this was doing it while I was asleep, or if it happened in some space between moments that I couldn't perceive. 2 weeks in, I set up a camera. Just a basic webcam pointed at my bookshelf, set to record continuously through the night. I was going to catch whatever was doing this. I was going to have proof. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. 8 hours of nothing. The album sat there, motionless, unchanging. No shadowy figures creeping into my apartment. No supernatural manifestations. Just the album, sitting exactly where I'd left it. But when I opened it, there were 5 new photos. Me at age 7, standing in the hallway of my childhood home, looking toward the camera with that same neutral expression. Waiting for dinner May 12, 1996. Me at age 11, sitting on the front porch steps. Enjoying the sunset August 8, 2000. Me at age 6, in the bathroom, looking at myself in the mirror. Getting ready for bed November 2, 1995. And 2 more that made my blood run cold. The first showed me in my current apartment. Not my childhood self me now, at 32 years old, standing in my living room. The photo was taken from roughly where my bookshelf was, looking toward my couch. I was standing in profile, talking on my phone, completely unaware I was being photographed. The date on this one, 3 days ago. The caption, in that same handwriting, Jordan making plans. The second new photo showed me sleeping. In my current bed. In my current apartment. The angle suggested the photo had been taken from the foot of my bed, looking down at me as I slept. The date, last night. The caption, peaceful dreams. I dropped the album like it had burned me. Someone had been in my apartment. Someone had photographed me without my knowledge. Someone had developed these photos and added them to the album, all while I slept, all without being detected by my camera. Or, and this thought was somehow worse, the album was doing this itself. Creating these photos through some mechanism I couldn't understand, documenting my life the way my mother once had, continuing her project long after she'd passed away. I called the police. What else was I supposed to do? I was being photographed in my own home without consent. That's stalking, harassment, breaking and entering. That's a crime. The officer who responded was professional but skeptical. He looked through my apartment, checked the windows and doors, examined my locks. Everything was secure. No signs of forced entry. No evidence of anyone having been inside except me. He looked at the photos in the album. And you're sure these weren't always there? Sometimes we forget things. I documented every photo in this album. I interrupted, pulling up my phone to show him my spreadsheet. These weren't here a week ago. I have proof. He studied my documentation, then looked at me with that expression cops get when they think you might be unstable but they're trying to be polite about it. Sir, is it possible you added these photos yourself and forgot? Are you under any unusual stress lately? Using any medication or? I didn't add them. I didn't take them. Someone else is doing this. He made a report. Told me to change my locks, maybe install a security system. Suggested I talk to my neighbors, see if anyone had noticed any suspicious activity. And then he left, and I could tell from his body language that this would go nowhere. To him, I was just another paranoid citizen, probably dealing with some kind of mental health issue, definitely not worth any significant investigation. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room with every light on, the album open on the coffee table in front of me, watching it. Daring it to change while I was looking at it. It didn't. Nothing happened. But the next morning, there were more photos. And these were worse. They showed me as a child, but in places I'd never been. In rooms I didn't recognize. Wearing clothes I didn't remember owning. One photo showed me in what looked like a basement, sitting on a concrete floor, looking up at the camera with wide, frightened eyes. The caption read, "Playing hide and seek July 23, 1997. I didn't remember any basement. My childhood home didn't have a basement. Another photo showed me at maybe age 8, standing in a bathroom I didn't recognize. The walls were a sickly yellow color, and there was something wrong with the lighting, too harsh, too bright. I was wearing a white nightgown that I definitely never owned. Boys don't wear nightgowns." The caption, "Bath time October 9, 1997. I started to shake as I looked through the new editions. They were all like this now, photos from a childhood I didn't remember, in places that shouldn't exist, doing things that never happened. And with each photo, new memories began to surface. Memories that felt real but couldn't be real. I remembered being in that basement. I remembered how cold the concrete was, how musty it smelled, how I'd been told to sit very still while the photo was taken. I remembered the bathroom with the yellow walls, how the light hurt my eyes, how someone had given me that white nightgown to wear. But these things hadn't happened. They couldn't have happened. This was false. This was implanted. This was. My phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway, desperate for some connection to the normal world. Jordan. The voice was familiar. Female. Older. "Honey, it's Aunt Linda. I need to talk to you about something." "Aunt Linda." My voice came out hoarse. I cleared my throat. "What's wrong?" I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation last week. About those photos you asked about. And there's something I need to tell you. Something your mother made me promise never to tell you. My heart was pounding now. "What are you talking about?" She took a deep breath, and I could hear it shake. "Those photos in the album. The ones you don't remember. Jordan, they're not from your mother. She didn't take them. Someone else did." "Who?" "The people at the facility. Where you stayed for those 2 years. Jordan, you weren't always with us. When you were 6 years old, there was an incident. Your father, before the divorce, She paused, struggling with the words. "He did something. Something bad. And you were taken away for a while. Put in state care. A facility for traumatized children." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "What?" "No. I lived with Mom. I was always with Mom. Dad left when I was 7, but before that, we were a normal family. I remember. What you remember is what your mother wanted you to remember. After you came back to us, after 18 months in that facility, you didn't speak for weeks. You were different. The doctors said you'd experienced severe trauma, that you'd dissociated from most of it. They said it was better to let you forget, to give you new memories, happy memories. So your mother worked so hard to rebuild your childhood, to create this normal life for you with photos and celebrations and love. She gave you a new past to replace the one that had been taken from you. You're lying." But even as I said it, those false memories, those photos were clicking into place like puzzle pieces I'd been missing my whole life. That basement. That bathroom. The people in white coats who would come to my room at night, who would make me sit still, who would photograph me for their records. "The album started appearing in your room about 6 months into your stay," Aunt Linda continued, her voice breaking. "Your mother visited every week, and she'd show you photos of the life you'd have when you came back to her. Birthday parties that hadn't happened yet. Family trips you take someday. She was so determined to give you something to hold on to, something to come back to. But there were other photos too. Documentation photos. Clinical photos. Photos that the facility took to track your progress, your deterioration, your... I hung up. I couldn't listen anymore. I looked at the album, really looked at it, and suddenly I could see the difference. The photos my mother had taken, the ones from my false childhood, they were loving, warm, full of light. The others, the ones that had been appearing, they were cold, clinical, traumatic. They were documentation of something I'd spent 26 years forgetting. But here's the thing that kept me awake that night, staring at the album, unable to look away. The new photos, the ones appearing each morning, weren't just recovering lost memories. They were continuing the documentation. The photo of me in my current apartment. The photo of me sleeping. These weren't from 26 years ago. These were recent. These were now. Which meant someone from that facility or something associated with it was still watching me. Still documenting me. Still adding to the clinical record of my life, page by page, day by day, night by night. I've tried to destroy the album. I really have. But every time I work up the courage to throw it away, I find myself unable to do it. Because as much as these photos terrify me, as much as they're unraveling the carefully constructed reality my mother built for me, they're also the only real evidence of what happened to me. The only proof that those 2 years existed, that that version of me existed. And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's why the album keeps growing. Not to torment me, but to remind me. To document the truth when everyone else chose to forget it. Last night, I opened the album to find a photo of myself from yesterday, sitting at this very table, writing these words. The caption, in that familiar clinical handwriting, reads, "Subject exhibits increasing self-awareness. Continue observation." I don't know who's adding these photos. I don't know if I'm being watched right now. I don't know if my childhood was real or if it was all a comforting lie built over a foundation of trauma I can't access. What I do know is this: every morning, there are new photos. Every day, more of my carefully constructed reality crumbles. Every night, I lie awake wondering if I'll be photographed in my sleep, added to the growing collection of images that prove I'm not the person I thought I was. My name is Jordan Hayes. I'm 32 years old. I work as a data analyst for a marketing firm in Portland. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment on the east side. And somewhere, someone is adding photos to my childhood album. They've been doing it for 3 weeks now. Maybe longer. Maybe they've been doing it my whole life, and I'm only now starting to notice. The album sits on my coffee table as I write this. I can't bring myself to open it yet this morning. I'm afraid of what I'll find. Afraid of what new memories will surface, what new documentation will appear. But I will open it. I always do. Because as terrifying as the truth might be, it's still the truth. And after 26 years of living in a carefully curated fantasy, maybe I owe it to that 6-year-old boy in the basement to finally see what really happened to him. Even if it destroys everything I thought I knew. Even if it means accepting that the person I've been for the past 3 decades is just another photo in the album, carefully posed, lovingly captioned, utterly false. The album is growing heavier each day. There are pages I haven't reached yet, photos I haven't seen. And I can't shake this feeling that when I get to the end, when I see the final photo, I'll understand everything. Or maybe I'll understand that there is no end. That the documentation will continue, page after page, moment after moment, until the album consumes not just my past, but my present and future too. Until I become nothing but a collection of images, cataloged and filed and forgotten, just another subject in an endless study of what happens to people like me. People who were broken. People who were fixed. People who were never meant to remember. But I'm remembering now. God help me, I'm remembering everything.